Hi, I'm Lynn Samita, and welcome back to my blog. This week, my mother would have been 93. And so on May 24th, I was thinking about her and just reflecting on the life she's lived and the journey that she and I took as we each in a different way dealt with her aging, with Parkinson's and all that impacted for her, and the lessons and things that I learned through that journey. And so I wanted to share a few things with you from that, and really two things. One is to touch on how we look at loss and grieving and so on, which is really, I think, in many ways one of our sacred cows in our world. And we all know it's very personal and that there is no timeline and so on. But both as a counselor and as a daughter, I've really had a chance to think about this whole issue of grief and loss. And so I'd like to share a few thoughts on that, as well as share what I discovered makes a tremendous difference in how we move forward with any big change. And so this whole month we've been talking about strategies, things that block our creativity and us moving forward, things that can help with overwhelm. And so we'll finish this month with a couple of thoughts and insights that I have that I think really do apply to many areas of our lives. So let's start with this whole idea of grief and loss and how we handle that. And I learned a profound lesson when I worked with a woman who had lost her husband. And I received a call actually from her kids saying that they were very concerned about their mom and would I consider doing a home visit because they really were at their wits' end in terms of whether she needed to go into care, whether she was just not dealing with the loss of her husband and that was the problem. They just didn't know what to do. And so long story short, I agreed that I would go out and do a home visit with her, which is pretty rare for me. It's unusual that I would do home visits. So out I went, and I had arranged to meet her at 11 o'clock at her home. And so knocked on her door and she welcomed me in and she said, "Would you like a cup of tea?" And I said, "Lovely, thank you, that'd be great." And she told me to follow her into the kitchen. So I proceeded into the kitchen and sat down at the table, and she was making tea. And I happened to glance at the kitchen table and noticed she had two place settings set. And I suddenly was sitting there thinking, wow, I wonder if maybe she thinks I'm going to stay for lunch. And I wasn't going to, and so I thought maybe I should just mention that to her. So I said, you realize that I'm just going to be here for an hour, I'll be gone by 12, and just wanted to make sure you realize that. I'll be gone before lunch. And she said, "Oh yes, that's what I understood." And I said, "Oh good." And so I was thinking, well, do I say anything else? And maybe I should just drop it and let it go. And anyway, I'm still sitting there. And so I said, I noticed that you've got the table set for 2 people. Are you having company today? And she said, No. I always set the table for Fred and I. And Fred is her husband who had passed away 5 years earlier. So I said, "Really?" And she said, "Oh, I know, it's probably silly, but it just comforts me to set the table for Fred. And, sometimes I even make food and, have it for him. And, I know that he's not here, but it just really helps me feel connected to him." And very quickly I was getting the picture. And so we proceeded to talk a bit about Fred and so on. And she said, "Lynn, sometimes I feel like I'm losing connection with him." And she said, "When I feel that," she said, "the thing that I know really helps is I go to the closet and I take out one of his tweed jackets." Well, Fred was a pipe smoker. And she said, "I can just smell that smoke, and I feel so connected when the aroma just fills me, and it's like he's right there with me." Well, needless to say, part of the problem was that she was still very much immersed in staying connected to Fred. What had happened as a result is she was narrowing her world smaller and smaller because she was trying to hold on to Fred and to the life that they'd had. So what precipitated the kids calling me was their mom had refused to have groceries delivered to the house, which she'd done for years and years, even when Fred was alive. But in the time since Fred had died, 5 years, the grocery boy had graduated from high school, gone on to university, and was no longer delivering groceries. And this woman, because she didn't feel connected to the new boy who was delivering groceries, and Fred, of course, had never met the new boy, stopped the groceries. And she continued to just sort of isolate herself, losing interest in her grandkids, in her children, and her life just became more and more contained, smaller and smaller. And I realized in that visit that this woman was not grieving. She was managing her loss and really not moving forward. She was desperately trying to hold on to the life she'd had with Fred. And so we worked together, and of course, part of my work was to help her bring things into her world that she could continue to connect with. Reconnect with her grandkids, bring in more of life that was going on around her, and kind of reconnect that whole bigger world. And the very cute part of the end of the story is when we actually had made quite a bit of progress, I invited her to come to my office, which was a big deal because she'd been isolating and not leaving the house. But she'd made enough progress and she came to my office and I served her tea, which was lovely. And we were sitting on the couch, just having our tea, and she turned to me and she said, "You know, Lynn, when you first met me," she said, "I'm thinking back and I think I was really lost." And I said, "Yeah, I think you were." And then she reached over and patted me and she said, "But you found me." And it was so touching. It was just such a dear moment because she realized, I think then, she'd gone into her internal world and was living there in her memories and got lost in that world. And so it really opens up an interesting question, doesn't it, about how we grieve and what really allows us to move forward when we've experienced a profound loss. So now when I come to my mom and I think, you know, she's moved on, she's not on this planet, what is it that's important for me to do as I move forward? And I think the lessons for me started well before she was gone. As I watched her age and deteriorate in her mobility, in her mental processing, in her whole way of coping, I had to let go of the mom that I knew, that was in my mind, the competent, capable woman who raised 6 kids, adopted 5, did all sorts of amazing things. That woman was disappearing. And I know many of you will be dealing with this in terms of parents or maybe partners. Even when we think of our children as they age, when they go from children to teenagers, the child is gone in many ways, and a teenager has shown up. How do we update our pictures in our mind? Are we even willing to do that when some of those pictures and those times were so precious? And I so understand how and why we want to cling to those, because there's happiness, there's joy, maybe there's even feeling of importance and relevance. But by clinging to those pictures of the past, we forfeit the present. We do not step in and allow the gifts of what is in this present moment to emerge. And so as I updated my pictures of my mom and realized she had less and less ability to flex and greater need to control, she wanted to make decisions, she wanted to be in control, she wanted to be right, I needed to surrender to that if I was going to stay connected to her, if I was going to really stay connected to my love for the woman that she really is on the inside. And so it was a gradual letting go of, for me, of being in charge and allowing her to have as much control and influence on things, which in the end of the day ended up with me being wrong on many occasions. I would suggest something, she would tell me it was wrong. I would remind her of something, she would say, I never told her. And over she would say, Lynn, you haven't got it right. And I realized if I let go of my desire to be right, I could stay connected and in a beautiful way have very precious moments with my mom right up to the end. And so for me, updating my picture and really recognizing her abilities and her deficits was so important in us staying connected right to the very end. So that's my the treasure that I take out of that whole journey, and what I'm hoping to pass on to you, and for you to consider, where do you need perhaps to update your thinking, your ideas, whether it's with a child, whether it's a parent, whether it's a loved one, a partner, or even about how you think work should be or a boss should be. Perhaps you need to update those pictures so that you can be present in the moment and open to really what's there and what wants to emerge. Okay, I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for tuning in. We love to hear from you. Please be in touch. I recently heard from a friend that she's been passing on these blogs. If you're doing that, we love it, and please invite people to sign on so we can send them directly to them. All right, thanks, take care, we'll see you next week.